After the bombs fell, monsters became real, and I lost everything. I remember an era when the monster under your bed and the monster in your closet stayed there, when the whispers and whistles hid in the wind of the trees, when covens and hives operated under the veil of night. Those days are long gone. When I was a boy, the world was safe. Children rode their bikes at night. Loving couples used to walk the streets into the wee hours of the night, forgetting what time it was in their love-stricken trance. People used to camp out and enjoy the night sky. Not anymore. Not since the bombs dropped. Now that I am a man, I keep to a strict schedule. Wake up, eat, check the salt ring, refresh the garlic wreaths, make sure the horseshoes are still intact, repaint the crucifixes on my doors, polish the silver doorknobs, use iron chains to secure my doors, scavenge, get home before dark, eat, pray for my wardings to work. People used to think I was crazy. They said that I was hallucinating these encounters. They laughed at me as I secured myself and my family. Most of those people are dead now. Once the bombs dropped, the fairy tale and campfire stories came true. Emboldened by the chaos that the Great War caused, they revealed themselves once again to mankind. After the monsters crawled out of their hiding places, the first round of deaths came. Human population numbers in the US had already fallen from 334.9 million to roughly 10 million. In the early days, the government declared martial law and sent the military to defend us from the monsters. They called for all citizens to turn in their silver jewelry and their authentic silverware. They urged us to do what I had already done. They told us to paint crosses, make garlic wreaths, etc. Most people didn't heed the warnings. In an odd turn of events, the conspiracy theorists called it a hoax. One host in particular, who was battling legal problems for one of his antics, tried to claim that the government was trying to enforce globalist communist law. He then pivoted about a month in, saying that the government should have done more. He then claimed that colloidal silver would protect you against the werewolves. He and all of his listeners are dead now. Religious cults quickly formed. One cult that revolved around the werewolves claimed that Fenrir was claiming disciples for Ragnarok. They would willingly give themselves to the packs of werewolves to feed them or to be turned by them. People began to worship the vampires, thinking they were angels sent from God because of their healing abilities. The wounded and sick went to them to ingest their tainted blood to exchange misery for immortality. Many women flocked to the witch covens, trading in their souls for a chance at power and safety. The gates of heaven and hell were bolted shut. The dead began to rise from their graves. Souls were barred from crossing the veil into rest or punishment. Those of us who have survived and abstained from these cults now live in constant fear, prolonging the inevitable. Most common monsters are vampires, not nocturnal. They only used to be for their own safety. Now, they act at all hours. They act like a beehive. There are various hives of them throughout the US. They function with a semi-hive mind. There's queens, the ones responsible for turning new vampires. There's workers, the ones who keep their human juice boxes alive. There's drones, the ones who actively hunt down potential prey or converts. Werewolves, only dangerous during full moons. They feed on both humans and animals. They function to no surprise, like wolf packs. They're less interested in turning people, but are willing to do so to strengthen their numbers. They convert via saliva in the bloodstream. Zombies, they have no mind, they only wish to consume. You're doomed either way if you're caught by a board of them. Either you get eaten, or you're fated to join their ranks. Witches, not technically monsters in a fundamental sense. They're still human, but have chosen to betray the rest of us for safety behind witchery. They only convert women and especially hate men and young boys. If there's a monster you can think of, it's real. The most common ones are the flocking types: vampires, werewolves, zombies, and witches. Wendigos, skinwalkers, and Kushtaka-type monsters are rare because they're solitary beasts. Most flocking monsters use the Fey folk to lure people into the woods. They're sort of like freelancers. They don't consume humans, but rather they just enjoy the pain they cause. A few months before the Great Dying, my family and I had moved to my old family cabin in the UP. It was secluded. The only ways in were through the thick forest, down the river, or to cross two bridges, one north of the cabin and one south of the cabin, that I had blown up as soon as we got to the cabin. I was not about to trust any stranger, and it was their fault that they hadn't listened in the beginning. My wife Kate, son Jason, and daughter Arlene helped me as I fortified the cabin. Windows boarded, drop bar locks put on the doors, and wardings of every kind on every square inch of the outside, and a large salt ring all around the place. I thought we were safe. After about 6 months of living there, we'd experienced random zombie hordes, werewolf packs roaming through, some stray drones wandering by, and even a Kushtaka swam down the river. But the wardings worked. It wasn't the supernatural that took my son. It was the winter that did him in. He contracted pneumonia after falling in the icy river. He died only a week later. We buried him under a big pine tree. Kate and I warded his grave to keep the monsters away. We even scrambled his brain so that he couldn't come back as a zombie. None of what we did could prevent his spirit from returning to us every night. We would hear him weeping outside. He begged us through chattering teeth to let him in. He lamented about how cold he was. Kate and I learned to ignore him, but Arlene was driven mad. One night, Arlene couldn't take it anymore. She snuck out and ran away after a fae that told her it would take her to Jason. I tried to run after her. I tried to save her, but I heard her screams followed by the familiar hiss of vampire drones. I came upon the clearing where they are, and I had the misfortune of witnessing them shove her into a large body bag. "Dad! Mom! Mommy!" I heard her scream. I began to weep silently. There was nothing I could do. My 8-year-old daughter, my little Arlene, was gone. Kate couldn't handle it anymore. She hated me. She refused to speak to me. For weeks, we were ships in the night, passing by one another. She ate what I cooked. She refreshed the wardings, but she never acknowledged me. I was dead to her. I woke up one morning, and I found a note on the table. It read, "Paul, I cannot stay here a second longer. Jason's voice haunts me. Your failure to keep Arlene safe enrages me. I can't stand to look at you anymore. I've decided to go and join a coven down in the Mitten. I hope you rot. With love, Kate. Then I was alone. For the last 10 years, I've been completely and utterly alone. I have no idea what the rest of the US looks like at this point, let alone the rest of the world. Communication between nations was cut off almost immediately after martial law was declared. Were other countries okay? Were we okay? Was I okay? I had no way of knowing. I always crank charge my radio and leave it on at night, hoping I'd hear something, anything other than deafening static. The static helps with tuning out my son's voice. He's no longer just your average ghost. He's turning vengeful. It happens eventually to every ghost if they spend too much time in the Vale. I just kept to my schedule. Wake up, eat, check the salt ring, refresh the garlic wreaths. Make sure the horseshoes are still intact. Repaint the crucifixes on my doors. Polish the silver doorknobs. Use iron chains to secure my doors. Scavenge. Get home before dark. Eat. Pray for my wardings to work. It was on my most recent scavenging trip that things took a turn. I saw your odd zombie, a fresh Wendigo kill in an abandoned Kushtaka den. Scavenging had become more dangerous over the years. I'd needed to venture further and further away from the cabin, not for food. I'd planted a fairly well-sized garden, and meat was easy to come by. With less people, there were more fish in the river and more game in the woods. No, it was for supplies. I'd raided every other shack or cabin in a 30-mile radius. Other than a butane torch I found, there just wasn't anything left. I came upon an open clearing around noon maybe, and I saw a deer, a massive buck just standing out in the field. I pulled my rifle up to my shoulder, put my eye to the scope, and took aim. It wasn't moving. It was just staring into the woods, when all of a sudden its tail flagged up and it bolted away. That was never a good sign. I decided it was time to head home. There was nothing for me to find. I took a different way home, a way that I knew had some blueberry bushes. I was walking along, and shunk! A red-hot pain shot through my left leg. Immediately I began to feel nauseous. I looked down and beheld my foot, caught in an old-fashioned bear trap. Laughs echoed from the woods. When I turned to look in the direction from where they were coming from, I saw the silvery faces of drones. They were about 200 yards off. I had to move quickly. I immediately took my belt off, tightened it around my lower calf. I pulled out my folding limb cutting saw, and without taking in the irony, began sawing through my ankle. Thankfully, the bones were completely shattered, so all I had to do was cut the flesh. I vomited from the pain as I looked. 100 rids. They were toying with me, enjoying the show. I frantically searched through my backpack for the butane torch that I found. I fired it up. I prepared myself for the pain I was about to go through and began burning my stump. I nearly passed out from the pain, but I managed to get through it. I looked, 50 yards away. By some miracle, there was a branch that had fallen that had a Y crook in it. It was the perfect height for a crutch. I began hobbling back to the cabin. I knew it was useless. I was still a half-mile away from home, but I had to try. And try I did. It didn't work. Drone number 1. Ah, what have we got here? Did the little rabbit chew his leg off? His teeth bare as he laughs at me. Drone 2. I can smell the blood in him. We have ourselves a vintage AB+. Haven't had one of those in a while. If we weren't on specific orders from the Queen, we'd drain you right now. But alas, orders are orders. And with that, they sedated me and stuffed me into a body bag. In my drug-induced sleep, I hear voices. I hear Kate screaming to swerve. I hear Arlene screaming, "Daddy!" I hear Jason screaming, but I can't quite make it out. When I awoke, I was in a hospital bed in a clean room. I had an IV in my arm. The doctor walked in. "Doctor, my God, you're awake! Nurse, get in here!" The doctors and nurses frantically took my vitals, checking over every inch of me. "Doctor, sir, you've been in a coma for 6 months. You and your family were in a terrible head-on collision by a drunk driver. I'm sorry, sir, but your family didn't make it." I began to weep. Had everything I'd experienced been a dream? How is that possible? "Doctor, I know this is a bittersweet awakening, but I assure you, you will be fine. We have excellent therapists, and we are more than happy to do whatever we can to make sure you make a full recovery." The doctor flashed a smile at me. I could have sworn that his canine teeth were too long and too sharp to be human. I flash him with the sign of the cross and he shivers. "Doctor, brr, a bit chilly, isn't it?"